Right. Well, all eyes are on Monday because the inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will happen. Now, it's probably going to be moved indoors into the Capitol Rotunda because of very cold temperatures expected in Washington. It's set to be the coldest inauguration day in 4 decades. Now, in a statement posted to his Truth social media platform, Donald Trump said that he doesn't want to see people hurt or injured in any way amid the freezing temperatures. The last time a swearing-in ceremony was held indoors was Ronald Reagan's second inauguration back in 1985. Now, with the first 100 days of a presidency seen as vital, we just talked recently about Keir Starmer's first 100 days. It's actually quite an American tradition, this first 100 days. Donald Trump has promised to hit the ground running. He's expected to sign a mountain of executive orders with nearly 60 one-day promises and up to 100 executive orders expected. But what do we think is going to happen on the economy? Because the economy was a big part of the election campaign. Well, Stephen Moore is a senior economic advisor to Donald Trump during the election campaign. He worked closely with him. He's also the author of the book, The Trump Economic Miracle. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. By the way, you're absolutely right about how cold it is here in Washington, D.C. It's going to be really frigid. Today it's very cold, and tomorrow and Monday will be in the teens. So people are bundling up.
Well, as somebody who grew up in Scotland, I can certainly appreciate just how cold it's going to be. So look, Stephen, it's such a huge moment, not just for America, but for the whole world. And we're all fascinated to see what Donald Trump is going to do. And the economy is so important. What do you think his first priorities are going to be, particularly on the economy?
Well, you were exactly right in just what you just reported, which is there will be a whole slew, dozens and dozens of executive orders on the first day when Trump comes in. Many of them will be involved in trying to produce more American energy and overturning some of the green energy mandates that Joe Biden came in. Many of them will have to do with issues with respect to so-called equity and racial preferences and things of that nature that have been unpopular. But I would say that you nailed it when you said that everyone is very closely watching what is going to happen with the economy, because you're right. The reason Trump won this election is that Americans were angry mostly about high prices. The fact that inflation went up so much, average prices went up by about 22% in those 4 years. And so one of Trump's mission is to make sure that we don't see galloping inflation and we bring those price increases down.
And it was really interesting just listening to so many, Americans being interviewed in the run up to the election. They just said, look, we just don't feel like we've got enough money in our pocket, as you say, filling up the gas into the car, the food on the table.
That's right.
How do you think Donald Trump can kind of try and turn things around quickly? Because if he can't sort of make people feel better, then people will get cross with him soon as well.
Well, that's a great point as well. And, one of the things I find fascinating, because I also worked for Donald Trump when he ran and won the election in 2016. And now here we are in 2024 with a kind of instant replay. But when Trump won in 2016, people who didn't like Trump, and, half the country was just aghast that this man was going to be president. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of concern about what he would do. And yet this election, America feels a little different. People are more confident. Even Democrats who didn't necessarily vote for Trump feel like he's going to bring a new spring in the step of the American economy. And how is he going to do that? That we're going to try to cut tax rates to make America more competitive. There will be a lot less regulation of business that is so onerous and expensive to make America businesses more competitive. There will also be a focus, as I just mentioned, on producing a lot more American energy. We have abundant amounts of natural gas. We have abundant amounts of oil and coal. We're also going to be building nuclear power plants. So we want to be, as Trump would say, not just energy independent, but energy dominant. And we have the capacity to do that. So I think those are some of the high priorities.
And one of the things that the rest of the world is, of course, looking out for very closely are the issue of trade tariffs. Do you think he will come in and swing big on trade tariffs?
Well, I don't know for sure. Well, ask me that question on Monday afternoon because there's going to be a lot of new executive orders. I haven't been directly involved in that, but what I'm hearing is that there will be new tariffs announced on Monday.
On
And
as early as Monday.
yes, that's right. And possibly, quite possibly. And so, there's talk of maybe a 10% across the board tariff of anything coming in. There's some talk of punitive tariffs on China, which I think most Americans would like to see because we view China as an enemy. But also a lot of tough talk with Mexico and Canada. So I can't tell you exactly what's coming, but I do think there will be a fairly aggressive tariff policy. Now, some of this is meant to kind of wield a big stick to get other countries to do things that are in America's interest, like getting security of our border, like making sure that countries are not they're playing by the trade rules and things of that nature. So some of it is real, and some of it will be a threat. A kind of a club that he will use, and he did this fairly effectively in his first term to get other nations to do things that America's security and economic interests.
Well, that's really interesting, Stephen. So you're basically giving us a cue to look out for what's happening on Monday, because it sounds like from what you're saying, he's going to get to work pretty quickly, and tariffs could well be on that agenda very, very quickly, as soon as Monday afternoon. Now, you mentioned China there, and you mentioned the fact that it's likely that the new president will want to put tariffs on China. It's quite a difficult relationship between the United States and China. Our Chancellor recently did a trip to China just last weekend, quite a controversial trip. The opposition MPs were saying that she shouldn't have done the trip. There was some sort of, a bit of fluctuation in our own markets. What do you think Donald Trump and his team will make about the British Chancellor making that trip to China and wanting to secure a significant amount of investment for the UK from China?
I think it's a terrible idea. I think, look, there's one major superpower in the country and that in the world, and that is the U.S. But China is trying to become a superpower. They still lag way, way behind the United States. And countries like the UK are going to have to choose. Are you going to be an ally of the United States, or are you going to be an ally with our enemy, which is China? I think it would be extremely foolish for Britain or any or all of Europe to make that decision because number one, we're a much more important ally than that China is, and second of all, China is a dangerous country. They are building up their military in a very aggressive way, and a lot of us in the United States think of China as Japan circa 1936, and so I don't understand why the British people would want to align themselves with China. They cheat, they steal, and they're trying to build a kind of, and also they're a communist country. So it's frustrating to me that if we want, look, I think the United States and Britain should have a free trade agreement. I think we should be closely aligned as our economy grows, the British economy grows. I took some flack a couple of weeks ago for saying that I think the UK needs to make a decision. Do you want to be more like socialist Europe, or do you want to be more like the free market success story of the United States? And that's a big decision for the British people to make.
And what's really interesting, because you're being really clear, you're saying you can't have it both ways. You've got to choose, and you've got to pick a side, and you go with the biggest superpower in the world. You go with America. That's where your special relationship is, and yet, Stephen, here in the UK, there's a lot of people, including a lot of people around the Prime Minister, a lot of other, influential politicians in Westminster from other parties saying, no, no, no. Britain has to kind of pivot away from America, or we have to kind of, have good relations with both sides. What do you say to them?
I don't get the logic of that. I mean, you just used the term that I think is so important here, which is a special relationship. And we've had a special relationship for 250 years. As you know, next year is our 250th anniversary as a nation. Britain and Canada and Mexico have been our three most important allies in over that 2.5 centuries. So I don't get the logic of aligning with China. I think if I would use a metaphor, it's betting on the wrong horse.
And one of our listeners has just messaged in saying Keir Starmer's biggest priority is to avoid tariffs from America. Do you think Donald Trump would put tariffs on Britain, given our special relationship, and given that, from what you're saying, it sounds like he would want to have a good relationship with Britain?
Well, by the way, I personally am very much a free trade guy, so I'm not a big fan of tariffs. So I want to make that clear
Okay.
to your listeners. But I think that there is a chance that Trump may impose just an automatic across the board tariff on any good or service that's coming into the United States. And by the way, that's if Trump were on with you right now, he'd say, well, wait a minute, these other countries like Britain and European countries charge a value-added tax when we bring things into your country. So we're just, Trump uses the word reciprocity, which is if you're going to impose tariffs on us, we're going to impose tariffs on you. And so, look, the last thing I want to see, and I think the last thing Donald Trump would want to see, is a trade war, because we know trade wars, nobody wins.
Right. And final thing, do you think Britain will get that trade deal that various British prime ministers have been trying for a long time?
Well, I'm just going to say something rather blunt, which is I think you need new leadership in Britain. I think you need a Donald Trump. I mean, you see what started happening.
We've just had an election, Stephen. We've just had a democratic election where the prime minister won with a big majority.
Yeah, well, I don't know the politics of Britain, I have to confess, but I think there is a move around the world. I mean, people are looking at what's happening in America, and people want to have a putting people first, a populist, someone who puts their country's interests first, not the arrogant politicians. So I'm here to predict to you that over the next couple of years, you're going to see Donald Trump-like candidates all over the world taking over, and that would be a good thing because so many of the politicians have lost touch with the people.
Well, look, really fascinating to speak with you, Stephen. Do come back on the show. I'd love to catch up with you when we're a bit further into this new presidency. Really good to have your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.